Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with your family and friends. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to get you over the midweek hump. If you want episodes to be downloaded automatically to your phone each week, all you need to do is hit the checkmark, subscribe, like, or follow button, depending on what podcast format you're using. While you're at it, feel free to leave our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words so more people like you can easily find our show. If you're really enjoying the show and you want to help us out, feel free to make a donation to www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. That's www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. You can also access the link in our show notes. We use the money from these donations to pay whatever expenses we incur from producing the show, but ultimately, we record this show for you. So if you keep listening, we'll keep recording and releasing new episodes each week regardless. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss on future episodes, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Thanks again for listening. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis, a podcast for people navigating the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. Join your hosts, Billy and Brian, a couple of average dudes who will serve as your armchair life coaches as we share our life experiences, both the good and the bad, in an effort to help us all better understand how we can enjoy and make the most of the life we have left to live in a more meaningful way. Take a deep breath, embrace the present, and journey with us through the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. I'm your host, Billy, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend, Brian, on the bass. Brian, how you doing over there, man?
I'm tremendous, thank you.
Oh, you took the day off today, didn't you?
Off of work?
Yeah.
Not off of the podcast.
Right. No, never.
Obviously.
No, we're always here. We're running like clockwork and taxes over here.
And a day off for me consists of only like 10 hours of work instead of 15.
Well, you were working on the bus today. What's new with the bus?
Yeah, just rebuilt the generator housing, plugged a few holes, did, various nonsense.
You guys are gearing up for a big summer trip.
Yellowstone, yeah, heading out through South Dakota. Yellowstone, we've got 3 or 4 nights in Yellowstone. We've got 3 nights in South Dakota. I think we're going, I don't know where else we're going. My wife just plans it and I drive.
That's a fair way to do things.
Yeah, I just say, where are we going? She said, point that way, and I, okay.
There you go. Do you think you guys are going to Badlands?
Probably, yeah.
Do you think you're going to stop at Rushmore?
Maybe. I would think. She wants to hit all of them for the kids, so yeah.
Got it. Have you ever been to Rushmore or Badlands?
I have, yeah. My family did that, and Kathleen's family did that, so it's kind of like, I guess this would be a tradition now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. Something that you're passing down. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. That sounds like fun. If you have room for one more, let me know.
I figure I better pass something good down because as soon as they get the gout, they're going to be fucking pissed. They're going to be so pissed. I know, I'm pissed about it, so thanks, Dad.
Oh, bummer. That sounds like a real bummer.
It's terrible. It's awful.
Well, something to look forward to, kids. I, on the other hand, April and May are my 2 busiest months of the school year because it's the end of the school year, obviously, but then I also am a coordinator for, it's a freshman transition program. And we are currently in the process of interviewing all of our juniors and seniors who are going to work with those freshmen next year. So today I had the pleasure of conducting 13 half-hour-long virtual group interviews on Zoom, 5 to 6 students per group, which is, I think it was a total of 75 kids that I interviewed today, 235 over the course of the last 2 weeks. So I'm a little exhausted today, but I'm always energized when you and I get together and we get to conduct our interviews for the podcast, it's a little different to do.
It is, yeah. Would you say it's a little more fun than doing the student interviews?
Yes, it is. It is. It's a little bit more engaging, a little more enlightening, a little more interesting, albeit they're great kids. They're wonderful, and they have a lot of great things to say, and I'm just happy that they are committed to making the world a better place. But I do look forward to this every Friday, and today we are actually bringing a close to our 4-part series on the female brain by Luann Brizendine. Now, notice we only did a 3-part series on the male brain, the female brain a bit more complex. So, Brian, do you feel like you understand the complexities of the female brain any better?
If I was going to give it a percentage, 0 to 100, I'd say about 4.5.
Well, luckily we have an expert today in female health and an expert in the female brain. Our guest today is Krista Margolis. Krista is an advanced practice registered nurse and a women's health nurse practitioner. Krista has advanced training in functional medicine. Krista really believes in working with each woman because ultimately they know as much as or more about their own bodies than she does. So they work together to create health and balance. Krista is also a mom of 2 teenagers and a 12-year-old, and she has been happily married for almost 19 years. Welcome, Krista Margolis. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Krista, to start things off, we always like to ask our guests what 10 roles they play in their life. So what are the 10 roles that you play in your life?
So my 10 roles are mother, wife, daughter, sister, friend, healthcare provider, runner, nature lover, adventure seeker, and exercise addict. Is that 10?
Yeah, that's right on the dot.
Perfect.
Nice work. Nice work. So we also like to ask our guests then, what are the 3 they're most looking forward to in the second half of their life? And what are your 3?
I would have to say, I mean, God, if my kids hear this, I might be in trouble, but probably not mother because they're going to go. They're going to leave and I won't be doing as much mothering, right? Probably the sister, friend, and adventure seeker. Tied with nature lover. I don't know.
Oh,
it's
okay.
a tough one, right? They kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that maybe not so much mom because you're not going to be doing the same nurturing.
Right.
And that's actually something that we're going to discuss later on in this episode. So,
fantastic.
Yeah, pay attention to that when we get to that point. So then let's talk about this. Well, what nature do you love? What do you enjoy?
Well, earlier before this, today I was mountain biking at Worth. So I like just being in the woods. Anything, water, woods, it just makes me really happy.
Logging.
Mountains, logging, yes. I'm a huge fan of stacking wood and the appearance of it. It's a weird thing. I know.
Huh.
Do you
That's
cut your own wood?
Often I do, yeah.
Nice.
I mean, I don't go chop the tree down and do the whole thing, but if there's a piece that's too big, I gotta take it down to a stackable size.
You'll get after it. Nice work.
Right.
And we know each other through a mutual friend, and you are going a little nature trip with some cross-country runners this summer.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, our mutual friend is fantastic, and we're taking 20-ish high school seniors, maybe some juniors, varsity runners out to the Black Hills, where it sounds like Brian's also going, and going to spend a week camping, not showering, and running with a bunch of teenagers. It's going to be awesome.
Well, that's going to be par for the course for many of them, the not showering. So,
Right. But it'll be great.
I imagine there will be some wonderful odors that you will get to.
And then a 15-passenger van, that's going to be even better. I'm super psyched about that.
Oh, that's going to be a veritable cornucopia of stench. Wow.
I mean, right?
Oh, what a beautiful use of both of those words right there.
Thank you very much.
That was
I'm
well
like
done.
Sting. I'm going to break out the Scylla and the Charybdis soon as well.
That was wonderful. Are you driving any of the vans?
Jamie, our mutual friend, is kind of in charge of it. I'm just being told where to go.
Gotcha. You're just along for the ride.
I'm along for the ride, so we'll see.
You sound like Brian. You're getting
Exactly.
told.
Right.
I mean, that's how I live my life. People tell me to go over here, I go.
Totally. There's another woman that's going to tell me to get in the car and go west. All right, I'll do it.
So that sounds like an adventure that you're going on as well, along with the nature.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit more about like where in nature do you want to seek out and go adventure?
Oh, that's a great question. I really want to do more kind of farther away. I haven't been to Australia. That's a big place. Peru, kind of, I don't know, all over the place, everywhere.
What's the draw to Peru and Australia?
I think just the different, the culture, but the photos I've seen, really. I mean, that's it.
You also kind of combined sister friend into one. So can you talk about what kind of relationship do you have with your sisters? Are you the older sister? Are you the younger sister? Are you the middle sister?
I have one older sister. She's 5 years older, but we're kind of a unibrain. I mean, we're very, very similar. People never know which one of us is older, and we're super close. And she's an adventurer, but I have to sometimes nudge her a little bit. So that's my next chapter. Yeah.
And then you have a younger sister?
Nope, just the two of us.
Oh, just the two of you.
Yep.
Gotcha. And is it no brothers at all?
No brothers, just females.
My two sisters are so envious that you don't have a younger brother.
We always wanted a brother.
Oh, I know. I'm sure they're willing to hand me off to you at any given time.
I doubt that. I doubt it.
You'd be surprised. So and friend, of course.
Yeah, because they do all my activities with me. I'm sorry, if my husband's listening, wife is really important. I'm just realizing, oh my God, I didn't even think about that one. Is it bad that I just take that one for granted? I don't know.
No, I think that's probably, and we'll talk about it later too. I think that's something that, it's just kind of a given. Like, yeah,
right.
Of course I'm
going to be with my husband, right? Yeah. I mean, no, my friends, I have super fun, active friends, and they just always say yes. I'm like, who wants to do this? I'll do it. Great. So we have a lot of fun.
One thing that I've noticed, Brian, when we talk to guests and they talk about their 10 roles, almost all of them talk about wanting to travel.
Yeah, you're right. That's pretty much universal so far.
Yeah, every one of them has talked about a real need and desire to travel. So just out of curiosity, have you done a lot of traveling up to this point?
I would say yes. Nothing super extreme or crazy, but yeah, I've definitely done a fair share.
Have you been to Europe?
I have been to Europe.
Oh, nice. What parts? Where?
Let me think where I've been. Spain, France. That's kind of it, actually.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I guess where in the U.S. are you thinking about? Where would you like to go to?
I haven't been to Santa Fe and Taos, like New Mexico area. I've driven through it, but I've never spent time there. It's high up for me.
I've heard that's a sleeper. Like, it's a gorgeous area.
That's what I've heard.
But it's not really well known that it's super beautiful and expansive and really awesome. So.
Yeah. And then the Northeast is another area that I haven't spent a lot of time in.
Skip it.
Really?
Skip it.
What? Really?
I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say, Zeb is he's like our friend Zeb.
That's what I was leaving. So I'm like, Zeb's up there. Don't go there.
Don't go. My son is super interested in Vermont for college. He's a junior, and we're going in the fall. And I don't know, there's something that I feel like I'm going to love. But we'll see. I could be wrong.
Vermont's nice. It is. It's
so don't skip Vermont?
Don't skip Vermont. Okay. No, I was thinking like
New Hampshire.
New York to about Massachusetts. Forget it.
No. We're a little further west. Yeah.
That's funny. So we also asked you, what's some advice that you would give your younger self?
I think what I wrote down and forgot is talk less and listen more. And I would stand by that. I'm still not good at it. I'm trying. I'm really trying.
I think that's good advice. The only problem is I'm so interesting. And I'm usually the most interesting person in the room.
Oh, so for sure.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah, why would I talk less?
That's a good point.
And I got to listen to other people's boring ass stories the whole time. Dumb.
This is why I'm still working on it at 48 years old.
So I guess why is that advice that you would give a younger version of yourself?
I think I've learned, like, through some tough moments parenting, I'm like, just stop trying to fix it. Stop interfering, asking questions. Just listen to what your kid is saying. And then I've learned that as a healthcare provider, as a wife, just shut up sometimes. It's hard though for me.
I think you make a good point, because I know I especially have a tendency to rush to conclusions and make assumptions because I'm waiting for my turn to speak, and I'm I'm listening to respond as opposed to listening to understand.
Right.
And that's feedback that I've been given multiple times, and something that I still work on to this day.
Wait, what were you saying, Billy? Because I was just waiting for it to jump in here.
Precisely, and that's actually my MO there. So something that I would work on too, so I can relate. So can we talk a little bit about being a healthcare provider, considering
Sure.
we are in a worldwide pandemic right now?
Yes.
So first and foremost, we want to say thank you for being a all-around superhero, because you are a real-life superhero for the work that you have done here during this time and even before that. So thank you so much for all that you do. Can you talk about what it's been like at being a healthcare provider the last 18 months?
Yeah, so it started out, I mean, I really don't see myself as a superhero because I'm not in the hospital. You know, I'm in a clinic. I'm not doing emergency care, so I haven't come that close to COVID. I look at, you know, the providers that have, and I can't imagine, because I know what a day feels like. That's so stressful where you can't stop. You can't even go to the bathroom if you're, you know, running behind or whatever, and these people are relying on you and they've got their days to get to. And then you still have to walk in the room kind of with that centered, clear space to listen, right? And to you know, help people. I don't know how these hospital workers and ICU care providers have done it. I'm just like, oh, thank you. So anyways, but we started out, it kind of just hit. And my niece was actually at our clinic. She's training to be a PA. And she was here doing her women's health rotation with me. She hates women's health. And she's like, oh, will you get me through this? I'm like, you're going to love it. She still doesn't like women's health. But she was here, you know, she's 27 years old. She had to get like 2 pelvic exams, a breast exam. You know, she had these things she had to get done to be checked off. She got them done. We left the clinic on March 12th, 13th, whatever, was a Friday. And I got a phone call saying, okay, she can't come back because we need less people around. I was like, yep, I understand. She got what she needed. And then they called back later that week and they're like, actually, you're not going to come back either. You're furloughed for now. I was like, oh, okay. All right. You know, so I was not working for 4 months maybe, which was interesting, really interesting. You know, we were only seeing kind of pregnant patients, some of them bleeding, you know, really very small things. But when I got back, it's kind of been normal since. You know, no dads or partners in the room, you know, with pregnant women until now. We're masked. You know, everything's covered. It's been fine though.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. Do you have, I guess, what are some words of wisdom that you have for people as we continue to navigate this? Governor Walz has announced that we might be, or I don't know if Governor Walz has, but it sounds like by July 1st, we might get rid of the mask mandate. And I think in the very near future, things are going to start opening up. I know like gyms and restaurants are going to start being able to go to capacity, that sort of thing. But we're not there yet. And even when we get there, I imagine we'll need to proceed with some caution. So I'm just kind of curious, what is some advice as a healthcare provider that you would have for people as we get closer to these things?
Yeah. Well, I think I personally, you know, we're not here to talk politics, obviously, but I think the governor's done a great job. He's truly followed science. And so I kind of trust, I see where we're headed, you know, we're, I think, at 60% vaccination rate. If we can just get a little further, I think all that makes sense. You know, we're all really fatigued by this, and I feel okay about it. I think what we're going to realize is we're all going to start to have colds and flus and all these things again that no one has had because we're not masked. We're forgetting that super simple thing about anytime you go somewhere, go wash your hands. Like, it's a really, really effective, super easy thing to do. Most people aren't that good at it. You know, you go to the bathroom, you wash your hands, that's probably it. You know, so I think there's some simple things that will keep us on the right path, but I think we'll be surprised at, oh, I got a cold or this or that. But I think we're ready. I think we're getting close to ready.
Do you think there's going to be like a rebound? Do you think there's going to be a big influx of colds and flu? Like,
I think in the fall, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I think our immune systems will be like, wait, whoa, what? What do we do? What happened?
that could be. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it could be interesting. But, we'll see. I mean, maybe not if people keep washing their hands. We'll see.
I'm curious how that will play out in terms of, hey, I have these symptoms, and now, well, is it cold? Is it flu? Is it COVID? Those sort of things. I can only imagine, I can't even imagine what it's like for healthcare providers and, the scientists who are trying to make these decisions at the CDC and keeping in mind that we're trying to get back to normal, but then you have people who are like still boy in the bubble, and then you have people who are they're boys in a bubble, and there's like 17 of them, and they're not masked, and they're doing shots and
right.
body shots and what have you, and it's like, oh goodness gracious, like it's so interesting to see the spectrum of where we are with things. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll be curious about that too. Yeah, and I think that's the other thing is we have never, any of us that aren't over 100 years old, we've never lived through a pandemic. And all you can do is learn with each day, each bit of science. Look at what we know now that we didn't know a year ago, that there was no way to know some of this stuff. So it's a lot of patience and a lot of grace and a lot of trust in the things we learn and the science. And shutting your mouth and listening, like I said.
I think that's a great way to end our first segment here, is just shutting our mouth and listen. And I think when we come back, we will take a listen to what Krista has to say about the emotionally mature female brain. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. If you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, giving our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words helps us on our quest to reach the top of the podcast charts. Finally, since you can't make a mixtape for your friends and loved ones like you used to do, share this podcast with them instead. We hope our experiences resonate with others and inspire people to live their best lives. Thanks again. And now, let's take a minute to be present with our breath. If you're listening somewhere safe and quiet, close your eyes and slowly inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do that one more time. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and open your eyes. You feel better? We certainly hope so. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We are here with our guest, Krista Margolis, who is an advanced practice registered nurse and a women's health nurse practitioner. And we're talking about the emotionally mature female brain. Now, a few things here. When I read The Female Brain by Luann Brizendine as a follow-up to The Male Brain by Luann Brizendine, I will tell you that the Female Brain book and the Male Brain book have the same number of pages. The Female Brain book is like 8-point font, and the Male Brain book is like 72 font. So I found the Female Brain book to be a more interesting read. And I especially found it to be a more interesting read because of what we're going to be talking about today. And just to start things off here, it says that a woman's emotional sensitivity is finely tuned and the female brain is an expert at reading faces, interpreting tone of voice, and assessing emotional nuance. Do you find that you've got those skills right there, Krista?
Definitely.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, I think it comes to that word intuition. I think it's not just looking at faces and tone of voice. It's walking into a room and there's an energy, there's a feeling, I can walk in like with a patient and kind of immediately be like, oh, she doesn't want to be here. She's annoyed that I'm running behind, or she's really happy I'm running behind because she can lie here and chill. I mean, you can just immediately kind of sense, I think.
I wonder if that has anything to do with, women having to, in general, be more aware of their surroundings or danger or stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, awareness. I think we've also been taught to be more careful. I mean,
exactly.
Careful what you say, careful how it's interpreted, careful, don't sound like a bitch, do sound like a bitch. I mean, there's been so many subtle and not so subtle messages given to women, I think, that it's kind of ingrained. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you can read people's minds? Are you at that level?
No.
No?
No.
All right. The reason why I asked that is, so I'm glad that you're here because I'm not sure if I've been pronouncing this correctly this entire time that we've been talking about it. The ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex?
That's how I would read it.
All
yes,
right, fantastic.
Yes.
It says that's larger in females and is more easily activated to sense negative emotions. So that's why women can read emotions better because their ACC is larger. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you have to be in tears for a man to recognize your emotions, that kind of thing.
Conversely, though, we can really read tacos very well.
Well, I mean, but tacos, don't you feel like tacos should be a love language? I feel bad that we neglected the importance of a good taco.
Well, we can dedicate an episode later to the taco.
We should.
We really should. It's definitely merited, probably a series.
We would actually like you to email us or send us a message on Instagram. Our Instagram is mindful_midlife_crisis, or you can email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com and let us know your favorite tacos, preferably in the Twin Cities, which may sound like an oxymoron, but if you like, we like to travel, and Brian's got a bus, so maybe we can do the great taco bus tour.
What's your favorite taco right now?
Oh boy.
How about you?
I was just thinking about that.
I like our taco. Rusty Taco is badass.
Yeah, that's a good taco.
That's a great taco because they've got the corn shells, the soft corn shells, which I love the corn. If I have a choice between flour and corn, I'm going corn 10 times out of 10.
Same, 100%.
I was at 612 Brew the other day, and they had a food truck there, and I really wish I could remember what the food truck was, but the corn taco was delicious, and the meat was plentiful, and I will find out what was there and get back to everybody because it was really good. It was a very tasty taco. All right. It says here, so we'll get back to talking about female intuition. It's actually grounded in biology, according to the book. It says an estrogen increase means that girls feel gut sensations and physical pain more acutely than boys do. The areas of the brain that track gut feelings are larger and more sensitive in the female brain. So do you get those gut feelings?
Yeah, and I think I actually didn't know that about the estrogen increase and feeling the gut sensations. It makes sense. There's estrogen receptors in our gut. That's really interesting to see that. And yeah, I do. I get gut feelings all the time.
Wait a minute. Can you explain that to me? There are estrogen receptors in your
our gut and in our brain.
And is it just females or is it males and females?
Way more in females.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah. Huh. And tons in our brain too.
And this, Billy, is why you have experts on.
Exactly, because otherwise it's just two jackasses who are like,
never would have known that.
Sound good to you? Sound good to me.
Yeah, that's probably it. We're kind of like social media. You just know nothing at all.
Yeah. We should have our own memes. So it says here, emotional congruence is when one person is in tune with the other person's emotions and body language. Women may mirror the reactions they see from their partner in search of the emotion that correlates with how they think their partner is feeling. They'll match breathing and posture to become a human emotion detector. Mm-hmm. So if you ever see, Brian, Kathleen standing a certain way, it sounds like what she's doing is she's mirroring you. And if you're like, oh, why is she doing that? Maybe that's because you're doing it. Have you ever been in that situation?
No.
No.
No. Or you know what? Maybe I just missed it. That's probably more likely.
That's probably more likely too, because as we're going to talk about here, we as men just don't read those kind of things very well. Do you feel like your husband picks up on your emotions?
I mean, yes and no. When you're with someone that long, like, you start to, right? But I'm still sometimes shocked. And again, sorry, Jeff, but I sometimes think, how does he not know that? How do you not get that? And then I reminded, because we're two very different brains. We're two very different human structures, I mean, just as individuals, but I do think there's such a huge difference. Huge.
I could tell though when I was reading this book, it almost felt like it's obvious that this book came out first, because she does make a lot of comparisons between the male and the female brain, and the male brain book doesn't make as many comparisons. It's more straightforward. And so I think maybe that's why I found this one so interesting. And like I said, the complexity of the female brain is just far more fascinating than the complexity of the male brain. I'm wondering, do you ever have sympathy pains?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the highest a time I can think of feeling sympathy pains is around my kids. You kind of, I can just tell when something's off with any of them, and you kind of go right into like, ooh, what is it? What I'm kind of feeling it. I can see on their face. I've had to learn though to let them navigate a lot of their own pains. I can't fix it, but that's taken a lot of years of parenting to figure that out. And I would say this last year, really during COVID, I mean, you turn on the TV and you're like, oh my God, the human suffering. You feel a lot when you see that.
Well, it says here that women actually pick up signs of sadness 90% of the time, and men only pick it up 40% of the time. And men usually don't read a woman's emotions until it's too late. So when they're in tears, and then when they're crying, men are like, why are you crying? Like, where is this coming from? And it's like, well, if you've been paying attention to the emotions leading up to that, you would have recognized it. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be such a surprise.
Right.
It says here, men also just don't want to take the time to figure out the emotion because it's too much work. Which very well could be true, because when I have students in my office and they're going through like an emotional time, I'm on the phone with the social worker or the counselor, and I'm like, can you come in here, please? Because it's it is emotionally taxing when a student is coming in and having an emotional moment. And I also know that, like, in my position, I don't have the same training as a social worker or a guidance counselor. Like, we have male social workers and we have male guidance counselors at my school. I just haven't gone through that training and that schooling to be able to recognize that kind of emotion and empathize with that emotion the same way that they can. It's not to say that I'm cold-hearted and I'm like, tough it up, get out of my, like, I'm not like that, but it's like, who in here is going to be able to better process this emotion and this experience with this student than I am? Like, I recognize what my strengths and my weaknesses are in the building. It says here that women are hardwired to handle emotional roller coasters, which can be frustrating when men won't sit with discomfort. I think that's important as we look back on what we discussed with why the middle-aged male suicide rate is so high, is that we as middle-aged men don't like to sit with discomfort for very long. We want to fix it, and if we can't fix it, then we feel frustrated. It says here that men are more inclined to become distant when they themselves are having a difficult emotional time. And we've talked about this in the past too. I think about, and we talked about it when we had Scott and Lee on, when there is such a lack of mental health resources available, and there's such a stigma around male mental health, that how do you actually navigate those difficult emotions? And I'm kind of curious, how do you provide emotional support, or do you refer your patients to other mental health supports?
Yeah, this whole, section we're just talking about, just my brain's just going, yes, yes, yes. I mean, I think first of all, the men and women piece, women are like used to having, roller coaster is a good word, but it's a cyclical change. Some women have it more than others, but there's a definite, you guys talk about it later, I know in the notes about PMS. I mean, there's a real shift that happens. Men have it to a tiny, tiny fraction of the degree. And I think we just get used to it. We're used to maybe a little more like I'm a little bit up here and I'm a little bit down here. You just it becomes part of your nature and you get used to dealing with it and handling it. Like today I need to listen to myself and just, hide under a rock or stay home because I'm just, that's it. And you're comfortable being uncomfortable, at least more so than I think men are for that reason. And in terms of offering emotional support, yes, I mean, it's a big part of my job. And women aren't afraid to ask for it. When they come in and they're in a vulnerable position anyway, sitting there, half naked with a paper wrapper on, basically, before an exam, they're vulnerable and they're very quick to, this is going on and they're in tears. And you're immediately helping them through that, in addition to physical, complaints or reports. And I refer a lot. I refer a lot to therapy. We talk a lot about nature. I mean, nature therapy is a huge thing right now and always has been and hopefully always will be. Acupuncture, exercise, diet. I mean, there's so many, relationship work, so many different ways to support a woman. And she's almost always willing to put it out there and talk about it.
I like that you talked about being comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it says here that only women report feeling comfortable being close with someone who is sad. I'll be honest, that is awkward to be sitting next to somebody who is sad and trying to comfort them, because I think the male brain is trained to fix the problem,
right?
And emotions are really difficult to fix. Mm-hmm. It's not like a chair. It's not like a truck. They're really difficult.
I wouldn't say that. Drugs and alcohol are a perfectly good solution.
And how did those work for you?
Oh yeah, not so well. Never mind. Just forget I said that. Forget I said that. Keep going.
Those did a bang up job for you, didn't they?
Yeah.
It says here that if women don't get the emotional response they want, they become persistent until they do, or they'll come to the conclusion they've done something wrong or that person doesn't love them anymore.
Yeah, that sounds, that's extreme, but I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think validation is huge for women, which is why, backing up a little bit, I think most women are comfortable sitting with someone who's sad or lonely or crying because we feel like we can kind of help and do something, and it's just listening. It's just literally like, here's my shoulder. It's okay. I'm not going to fix it. I'm not going to fix the problem, but I do agree that I think a lot of men, they want to fix it, which is noble and great, but you can't fix someone's 30-year dilemma or this issue with this family member. You can't fix it. You just have to listen and be okay with sitting there in someone else's sadness, and then you can move on. You don't have to do it for very long.
It says here that women have the ability to navigate emotional nuance just because their amygdala is more easily activated by it. And men's amygdalas, on the other hand, they respond to threat, to the relationship or a physical threat. So, women are, and the other thing too, and part of that is because men have bigger amygdalas, women have bigger prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex is what regulates our emotions. That's why we talk a lot about the importance of practicing mindfulness, because mindfulness actually develops that prefrontal cortex. And when we talk to Sarah Rudell Beach, the reality is that a lot of the people that she works with are females. They're in tuned and okay with developing that prefrontal cortex. And I've been to mindfulness retreats, and I'm very often one of the very few dudes that's there. And it just seems like that idea of developing, and I don't think men really look at it that way, that you're developing your prefrontal cortex. They just look at it like that looks like some floofy shit that I'm not going to do. Right. But really what it's doing is it's actually enhancing your ability to regulate your emotions that much better. So then, in terms of, would you say you got a good memory?
Well, interestingly enough, I would say most of my life I have until what we call perimenopause, which I know you guys talk about a little bit. It's kind of shitty right now.
So you're losing memory?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But do you still have memory for like emotional moments and sentimental things?
Past memory is all fine. It's, even like, oh yeah, you sent me that. It's just, where did I put something? It's the short term kind of. Long term is fine. Yeah. And definitely, I can remember things that made me feel sad from when I was 4.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And happy, like big emotions.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. It's funny that you mentioned that. It says here that the female brain has more circuits dedicated to sentimental imagery and memories. So on the flip side of that, the female brain has an aversion towards conflict. So because your prefrontal cortex and your ACC is larger than those that are in men, women are able to chew on their anger longer and not be as reactive. Now, there's a controversial take. Yes, you're able to chew on it longer, but I feel like that makes the woman more plotting. like where when I'm angry, I will immediately react, and I feel like a woman is like, okay, no, is that that's the route you want to take, huh? Okay.
Why don't you just go to sleep?
And I'll make you some oatmeal in the morning. So it's not it's cinnamon, not arsenic. Yeah, I'm curious. That kind of made me chuckle a little bit that they're able to chew on their anger a little bit longer. Once the woman has processed the anger, her verbal circuits kick into high gear and she can lash out verbally, whereas men will lash out physically. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about when we had Judy on, how that women have that verbal processing that's a bit more refined than what men have. And I'm curious, do you see that too?
I do. I do. I think what's interesting is aversion toward conflict. Yeah, I have a lot of friends who will say, oh, I just hate conflict. I don't want to do this or that. But I think it, again, changes as, I know we're going to get to a little more kind of this no BS stage that we get to of you've kind of grown into who you are. Maybe if you have kids, you're kind of nearing, you've done it, you're raising them. You move into the stage where you just care less about what other people think. And I think conflict becomes less like, say it, mean what you say, be honest, just don't be harsh and rude, but just a boundary, say it and mean it and carry on. And I do think as women get older, the caring so much about the person you're the conflict decreases. Not in a mean way. You're like, okay, I said it. I was respectful. I was kind. I'm moving on to the next thing.
As you bring that up, it, for me, connects to this next point where it talks about anxiety is 4 times more common in women. And it didn't specify like at what age. I know when we talked a couple weeks ago that rates of depression are twice as high in women as they are in men. And that especially starts around the age of 15, which just so happens to be when girls start to menstruate as well. So there's kind of, we talked a little bit about the role that menstruation has on a woman's emotional stability. And I'm curious, with the women that you work with, do you see or do you hear more women in their 20s and 30s and maybe their early 40s talk about anxiety, and do you hear less of that in late 40s, 50s, 60s? Or
I would say for sure a lot of teens, early 20s, more now than I've ever seen. We've also had a really weird year, but yes, interestingly enough, I think women in their later 20s, 30s, when they're having babies, aren't talking about it as much because guess what? They're totally focused on somebody and something else. Now, like postpartum mood disorders are a separate issue and are very huge. But that aside, women aren't coming in and talking about it. They can barely get on their clothes and get out the door for their yearly exam. I mean, they're doing so many other things. But definitely in the 40s and 50s, I mean, I would say truly if I see, say I see 14 patients in a day, I bet 9 of them score high on the anxiety scale.
Wow.
Medium to high. It's not often that someone's like, I'm all good in my mental health, because we give a screening for every patient, and they're not all off the charts, but it's significant. And then women that come in their later 50s, 60s, 70s, oh my God, they're like, they don't have an ounce of anxiety. They're just like, whatever.
When they score high on that, do you ask them what's causing this?
Yeah.
And is there a standard response, or is it kind of all over the board?
It's all over the board. I mean, it's relationships, it's their work. Again, the last year there have been a lot of reasons for people to score high. I think it's been a record year of like, we're all at the end of the day, we're all like, whoa, big day. Our job is to make sure they're safe, that they're not suicidal or going to cause harm, that they're getting the help they need. But it takes a lot of women, a lot of encouragement to seek help for themselves in that regard.
So you talked about 9 out of 14 would score medium to high on an anxiety spectrum. And we mentioned this just a little bit ago, where women are twice as likely to suffer from depression, especially during their reproductive years. And it says here that scientists believe this is due to a surge in progesterone and estrogen during puberty.
So I think this is when starts the cycle, right? And serotonin's our happy brain chemical. It's what we want. And estrogen has a huge impact it's a neurotransmitter. Estrogen not only helps stimulate that neurotransmitter, but it increases its effectiveness. So as a woman kind of goes through a perimenopause where the estrogen starts to drop, the estrogen, the receptors in the brain are like, wait, I'm missing something, so a lot of women starting around 40, go in and get put on antidepressants. That's not wrong, but it's more likely or quite possibly her just lowering estrogen that's causing it. She's not depressed per se, so it's working on the hormone balance, but it has a huge impact.
It manifests in the same way, but the cause is not. Yeah.
Right. And again, an antidepressant's not wrong. It's not the wrong choice, but a lot of women are left going, oh, I'm in that category, and I'm like, no, you're just aging appropriately is really what's happening.
The book talks a lot about hormone therapy. Mm-hmm. There's actually a small chapter that's dedicated at the end to hormone therapy, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next segment as well. So I have a couple questions for you when we get to that. I'm curious. So we talked about this in the first episode of The Female Brain, where it says here, the serotonin transporter gene, and that you just mentioned, serotonin generates happiness, right? That may also have an impact on a woman's depression. So if they're missing that gene, because it's a hereditary gene, sometimes that doesn't get passed down from generation to generation. And we talked about how trauma is actually a hereditary gene that's passed down. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, do you see that? How do you see that? What does that look like?
Yeah, I do. When they come in for the kind of visit I'm doing, it's not a therapy session. It ends up being that a lot. But sometimes if we can get to that, kind of what's causing it, it's a lot of, this happened when I was younger and this, and they're sitting there going, oh, I've never talked about this. It's probably time, or grief, unresolved grief, loss. A lot of those things show up when women are starting to have symptoms of anxiety or depression, or realizing, oh, this has been living there, or it was just passed down to me. Like you said, this happened. I mean, I think we're hearing a lot more about that with race, this lived experience. And I think there's still a lot to learn about it and a lot of work to be done around that for sure.
It's interesting that you bring that up. Brian and I talked to our friend Mina. She talked about how, just now at age 36, 37, 38, she was finally unpacking all this emotional trauma from her life, and she had talked about their family actually has a name for it that I can't remember what she said, the Johnson gene or something like that they just like the Johnson sadness gene or something along those lines, that it's been passed down, and that's just how they've operated under that mindset for a while. And she had to unpack that and process, hey, this is this is what you've experienced in your life, and let's come to grips with that in a healthy way so that we can move on and make healthy decisions around our relationships and our communication. So,
well, yeah, and I think talking about it's so important. I mean, I think we get in these patterns with family stuff too. Well, the great-grandparents did it this way, so the grandparents and then the parents. And I feel like our generation is kind of like, yeah, but that makes no sense. Like, why don't we talk about it and resolve that and break that pattern, and do things differently with our own family?
I do see more and more people supporting talking about their mental health. And so it's important that we continue to talk about our own mental health, especially if we are struggling, or especially if we have family members who are struggling, to encourage them to continue to talk. It says here that as we age, women are more inclined to express their emotions. But for men, this can be a whole new world, because men actually, as they age, they build more oxytocin and they lose testosterone, and it's just this switch, and all of a sudden they become more emotional, and that's really challenging. That's really strange for them, and it may become difficult for them to come to grips with that. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about before. Like, I just wonder, is that a cause for such an alarming suicide rate in middle-aged men? It's just that the shift in hormones is actually what's causing them to have these emotional responses that they probably have tucked away for such a long time.
Well, yeah, and then I've always truly felt kind of bad for guys, because I think it's sad that the sort of expectation or the groundwork that is laid for you from being little boys on is that whole, don't cry about it, the whole being tough, that macho. I have such a strong opinion against that. And I think, you if you've been kind of shoving stuff down or just not talking about something, you get to that age and then you feel like, well, I don't know where to go with this. It's suffocating and overwhelming if you don't have an outlet for it. And who can do that? Who can carry on like that? So I don't know the facts behind it, but my guess is it would lead to, for sure, some of those horrible outcomes. I mean, it's not fun to live in discomfort, but we're humans and we all have to at some point.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why we wanted to start this podcast, is because we wanted to give people an opportunity to hear from a couple of guys who have, gone through these shifts and have struggled with a variety of things, and maybe that opens up the dialogue. And we've heard from people who listen, and they're like, hey, thanks for putting that out there. We really appreciate it, because it means a lot to know that we're not the only one out there who think and feel this way.
Absolutely.
So we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to continue talking about the emotionally mature female brain. We're going to dive into those menopause years. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Thanks for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to help get you over the midweek hump. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Oh, and don't forget to show yourself some love every now and then too. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We are here with Krista Margolis, who is an advanced practice registered nurse and a women's health nurse practitioner. Krista, I was so excited to start talking to you that I forgot to ask you, what does a advanced practice registered nurse and a women's health nurse practitioner actually do? So can you talk about that really quickly?
Yeah. So I work in a clinic, a private clinic, and I will see women. Really, probably the youngest patient I've seen is 14 up till 80, mainly doing kind of wellness exams, yearly physical exams, birth control consults, STD testing, a lot of perimenopause and menopause consults, breast health. We do a lot of mental health, but that's not because we're a lot of women's one visit a year, kind of thing. So we end up doing that, but that is not I definitely move people on to that. I will start people on antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, and as long as that takes care of it and they're getting therapy, I'm okay. But if they need more, it definitely needs the bigger guns.
So you talked about menopause here, and that's where we're going to start in this segment. It says the average age of menopause is around 51 and a half years old, or 12 months after a woman has stopped ovulating. Sound right on par there?
Right on par. Stopped ovulating, also stopped having her period. So 12 consecutive months of no period, and then you get the label. You're in menopause.
Oh, interesting. So I always feel like menopause gets a bad rap, and so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that, and what do you hear from the women you see about going into menopause?
Yeah, I mean, when I read that, when I was looking at your notes, it was, yes, absolutely. Young girls have a horrible outlook or thought about getting their period. So puberty is just this awful, horrible thing. And it's the same thing with menopause. And I think it's, again, the society we live in. We don't value women after a certain point. I mean, or at least traditionally we haven't. Women think I'm useless, what's going to happen. And if you look back, I mean, I don't remember the exact dates, but late 1800s, and I think you maybe have that in your notes, women only lived to 49, 50. So post-menopause wasn't a thing. You went through menopause and you were dead. I mean, that was that was what happened. We now, I'm 48. I mean, once this happens, I hopefully have 30, 40 more years. I mean, this is just a fraction of my life. There's a big chunk of my life that I'm not going to have my period. I mean, so I think I'm trying really hard to change, to shift that paradigm and make it be, it's not scary. It just is, and I'd rather live live in menopause till I'm 90 than barely get through menopause and be dead at 49 if I have the choice.
It says here that a woman's menstrual cycle plays less of a role on their emotions as they age due to plunges in testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and as a result, their amygdala and prefrontal cortex are fully functional and consistent at that time. Mm-hmm. So you just have to wait until menopause in order to be a rational woman, I guess.
Exactly.
Wow.
It says here that women are less concerned about emotional nuances and keeping the peace once they hit menopause. She doesn't get the same rush of dopamine as she once did when socializing with friends, and she's less inclined to attend to others' needs. I feel like menopause should just be dubbed the I don't give a fuck years.
Absolutely. I might write a book and label it that.
We'll take 30%.
Perfect.
It says here that the hormonal changes in the brain during the beginning stages of menopause may make a woman act erratic, like she's going through puberty all over again. Now, this is where we talked about perimenopause, and that's defined here as the 2 to 9 years before menopause. So can you talk a little bit about perimenopause?
Absolutely. So I think, something you just said a little bit ago when you said women are less concerned about emotional nuances and keeping the peace. We've kind of touched on that a couple times, and it's very true. It's kind of like, I can't care anymore about this sensitive thing over here and this person that thinks I don't do this well enough, whatever. You just care less. And women are so, the focus is so outward, kind of in those childbearing years. And, we're trying to work and volunteer at the school and raise kids and be a good wife and be a good friend and a daughter, all of these things. And not all that is important, because it is, but the shift does change. And there's been a lot of research on this. You become more inward at a certain point. And there's not exactly a magic age, but it's generally in this time frame, which is kind of leading up to menopause, where you're more about, well, what do I want? Am I doing the job I want? Am I happy with myself? Am I productive? You care. There's a lot of job changes, a lot of divorce, a lot of, empty nest becomes a real thing. So it's a huge time of shift. And yeah, the perimenopause years, and this is what I try to tell people, again, like when you said menopause gets a bad rap, perimenopause is what should maybe get a bad rap, because it's, again, we talk about these cycles. Now the cycles are like up, 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 down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down. There's no pattern anymore. It's very chaotic when you think about what the hormones are doing. They're not playing this nice game of tag anymore. They're just like, I'm doing what I want. And once that stabilizes, once you reach that menopause point, everything is calmer seas. And I see it all the time, and it makes sense with what's going on. But the process, the transition to menopause can be really challenging for a lot of women. Not for everyone, but for a lot of women.
And it says here that right around 80% of women will go through perimenopause, and that some of the signs of perimenopause are hot flashes, energy bursts and drops, cravings for sweets and carbs, and a shortened menstrual cycle. Anything else to add to that?
Oh my God, every body system is affected. So thinning hair, thinning nails, achier joints, more broken bones because you've got less synovial fluid because of lack of estrogen. Brain fog. I mean, that's what I hear almost all the time. You know, I can't remember stuff. I'm foggy. Sleep gets out of whack for a lot of women. Weight gain, particularly around the middle, like acne. I mean, it's all sorts of fun things.
Oh, that's so interesting that you said that. So it really does. You really do revert back to puberty all over again.
Yeah, it's like you're kind of going in reverse. You know, you're winding down versus starting up, but it's the same fluctuations that are happening.
Ladies, I'm so sorry that you have to go through such like a hormonal roller coaster your whole life.
And many of us are sorry to you gentlemen that we also go through this.
Yeah, and that's what this book made me realize, just like, wow, like that there's a lot going on in a woman's bodily system and in her brain. Like that's why I found it to be such a fascinating read, more so than the male brain. And so this is where she talks a little bit about therapy or hormonal therapy. So it says here, estrogen therapy may increase those levels of oxytocin that decrease during menopause, and it may help women feel more nurturing. It may also help with these drastic shifts in brain and body regulation. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend hormonal therapy, estrogen therapy?
So, yeah, I mean, in 2002, there was this huge study called the Women's Health Initiative that got shut down because women were taking combined hormones, estrogen and progesterone. You have to take them together to protect your uterus if you have a uterus. And hormones got a bad rap. Everyone was like, cold turkey, off your hormones. Oh my God, within 6 months, everyone was sitting in the office, sweating and crying and going, I want my hormones back. And what we learned, it was really good because we learned that they're safe if your history allows such, your family history, your health history. And we learned it's kind of the smallest amount for the shortest amount of time possible, but only if you need them for quality of life. So some women kind of breeze through and they're like, nah, nothing. Other women are like, give them to me now or everyone around me is going to be dead. So it's yes, I prescribe estrogen all the time. Is it just a cookie cutter approach? Like you're in menopause, here's hormones? Absolutely not. But they can be very helpful.
So, and estrogen plays another important role because it increases the blood flow to the brain, which is why women experience fewer strokes than men. Now, women also have testosterone. They just they're not flooded with it like men, because men have, I think it's like 25 times the amount of testosterone. That's why we're such horn dogs.
Interesting.
Yeah. As testosterone levels fall in women, their libido falls, so they may suggest testosterone supplements in order to boost your woman's libido, because women lose 60% of the testosterone that they had in their 20s by the time menopause rolls around.
Have you ever had testosterone boosting supplements or anything? Have you ever tried them?
I haven't. Have you?
Yeah, they're awful.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, it's the classic, you want to fight and fuck. That's it. I mean, that's it. Like, you're either having sex or you're fucking pissed. I mean, I guess that depends on your natural testosterone level. Like, I have a fairly high testosterone level, so supplements were not a good idea for me because it just got out of control. I mean, I found myself like Pete Bourbon bore the brunt of it one time, and I just, for no reason at all, I just completely berated him, and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I got to stop taking these things.
And did you try to fuck him after that?
No.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering. Well, just out of curiosity, why were you taking them?
I was doing it for workout supplements because I was trying to build muscle at the time. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll do a little more testosterone. It'll help with the muscle building, that sort of stuff. And it just was totally not worth it. It was an awful experiment for me.
So, not joking here, how is taking testosterone different from like HGH or like an actual steroid?
I don't know.
Did you
I have
break
no
out in
idea.
acne at all?
No, I didn't.
Interesting.
It really just affected my mood, but it did enhance the workouts, obviously. It gives you a little more, I don't know if it's drive or ability to work out a little harder. Like you want to, you can go harder, you can lift more, but the emotional trade-off was not good for me.
Do you have an answer for that? Like how related is testosterone to HGH or steroids?
I don't know, actually, because I never prescribe them. And women's testosterone has been it's kind of waned a little bit, but for a while it was all, women taking, oh my God, I'm blanking on the little blue pill.
Viagra?
Yeah, like the Viagra and women. And, people tried it. I will be honest, I have not ever had a woman take it and say that it helped, which is, that's maybe just the patients I've seen, but it's never been a big success story.
It's interesting here. Had you maybe been taking estrogen supplements, you might have remembered the name of Viagra because it says
Exactly.
here that women who use estrogen supplements were found to have better memories than older women not using estrogen supplements.
True.
They also saw less shrinkage of the brain areas that regulate decision making, judgment, verbal processing, concentration, and listening in women who took estrogen supplements. I feel like I should take estrogen supplements.
Right? I mean, it's too bad there are potential risks with it because it's kind of magic.
Isn't soy milk rumored to be high in estrogen?
So it's kind of like a plant-based estrogen is what soy is. If you look at an estrogen receptor, the receptor, if a estrogen goes in, it fits it perfectly. Soy sort of fits the receptor. I mean, it helps fulfill some of that. And it's controversial. Some people say stay away from it. Some people say take it.
Why is estrogen bad? What are the risks associated with taking estrogen?
So it's our native estrogen during all these years is so good and so important, like over 400 functions in our body. And a lot of important ones. I mean, libido is huge, huge. And that's when we were talking about all the different things that can happen, hot flashes, blah, blah, blah. Decreased libido is up there with weight gain and sleep that I hear the most, decreased libido. So increased risk of potentially breast cancer. The studies kind of go like this. So if you've got a little cancer maybe sitting there and it's an estrogen receptor positive, any exogenous estrogen we're giving you is going to go feed that possibly, that
wow.
cancer.
Interesting.
But they're not all estrogen positive. And then it's helpful for the brain. It also has an increased risk of blood clots and stroke.
Huh.
Wow. Interesting.
And that's true for like a birth control pill with estrogen in it also.
Sure.
But as we get older, we're a little higher risk for that anyways.
I've heard that too much soy milk will give you man boobs because of the estrogen. Can you verify, debunk that?
I mean, I can't say that's totally true. I can't say it's totally not true. It kind of makes sense, but you'd have to, I think, be drinking a shit ton of soy milk for that to have that kind of effect.
Silk soy chocolate milk is very tasty.
I agree. And like tofu, my son's a vegetarian, eats blocks of tofu all the time, and I'm always like, you don't have boobs yet. I mean, we're, so far okay.
I like it. Brian, the scientist nerd in you is loving this conversation.
It's interesting. It's fascinating to me. Absolutely. Yeah.
It says here that if a woman goes 5 to 6 years post-menopause without estrogen supplements, she'll lose out on the benefits of these supplements if she starts taking them. So there's a window in which you can take them.
Well, kind of a window, because then what happens is those receptors are, like I said, it's the perimenopause, this up and down. And then once things, you kind of imagine like how a water, like perfect water skiing morning, how the water is just glass. It kind of gets like that. And taking the estrogen's there aren't any ripples to fix anymore. So taking it's kind of like, it doesn't do a whole lot. If you're taking it while you're needing it, it has a different effect.
Gotcha. So we alluded to this when we were talking about how you're starting to sort of unplug from the mommy brain, right? And that's what happens as women get older, is they just become less nurturing because you've taken care of your kids. They're old enough to take care of themselves. You just don't have the need for that, but you also have that hormonal shift, so it's not as imperative. It's not such a drive. It says as kids get older and are less inclined to hug their moms begin to lose that maternal nurturing spirit because the same amount of dopamine and oxytocin just isn't released as often. This can be both liberating but difficult at the same time. Are you fine? Are you going through this?
I didn't know that till I read that. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. They just don't need you as much. And I would say it's when you first realize that, it feels like someone has taken a really sharp tool and like jammed it. And now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm kind of getting used to it.
Is your 12-year-old still?
Yes, but she's a third kid and she follows her older siblings. So she's kind of like, I got this, Mom. She's hands down the most independent person in our whole household.
Oh, wow. That's actually very interesting coming from a third child, the baby boy. So because I'm not at
My
all.
husband's a third child and I wouldn't say he is either. But
Yeah.
she's kind of like just does her thing.
Interesting. Usually that's a firstborn trait. So it says here, just having the child around the house, even adult children, can continue to activate oxytocin and dopamine levels for moms. But once the children leave, those levels begin to decrease. I'd be curious to talk to empty nesters about whether or not they feel that. You know, that once their children are out, I wonder. Both of my sisters are going to be empty nesters here very soon. So my middle sister, both of her kids are out the house. They're in college. My niece graduated this year. And then my oldest sister, who lives in Washington, my youngest niece is graduating high school and is going to the University of Kansas. I should ask them, how are you feeling about being empty nesters? I think my middle sister is just fine, but I know that she misses having the kids around. She's very much like an intense mom, and she loves having the kids around as much as possible. But it says having a close connection with a grandchild may actually improve that child's prospects for survival. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Studies show that women who are unhappy in their marriages report more illness and negative moods during their menopausal years. Do you hear a lot of that in your office?
Yeah, I see this a lot. I mean, it reminds me of a patient I saw yesterday who that's her primary reason for being so unhappy and scoring so high on that. And it's kind of something we talk about every year. And finally, COVID just kind of forced her. She's like, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And I was like, okay. This is all right. So I'll be curious to see if she's not married next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and so that's a nice segue here because it says 65% of divorces by people over the age of 50 are initiated by women. So it's rarely the case that a man is running away with a younger woman, that old trope right there. It's actually the women who are just like, I'm done.
Yeah. That statistic doesn't surprise me.
No, me either. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Oh, Brian, make sure you're nice to Kathleen.
I'm always nice to Kathleen.
You are. You treat her well. She treats you well. Like I said, you guys are relationship goals.
That's true.
It says here that the book suggests that the lack of reproductive hormones may be why women view their husbands as being the cause of all their misery. I just like the way that they put that.
I did too.
So I like to call this the Eat, Pray, Love segment right here. So it says Margaret Mead counters all of this by coining the phrase postmenopausal zest, which a woman can feel due to feeling freed from menstrual cycles and all that comes with it. So I'm just going to get rid of all my personal attachments and go to Rome for a year and then go to India for a year and then go to, where does she go? Indonesia after that. India, Indonesia, and Italy is where she goes. The 3 eyes, you see, because I think it's like a chakra thing.
Okay.
Yeah. No one's ever read Eat, Pray, Love? Just me?
Can I be honest?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I remember having discussions about this, like in yoga classes when it was popular. I couldn't finish it. She made me crazy.
Oh, she's the most entitled and overprivileged woman of all time, and doesn't recognize her privilege and her entitlement. It drove me nuts.
I was like, I just can't. No.
I mean, good for you to be able to travel like that, but Never in my life have I read through a book that described more first world problems in my entire life.
And what seemed to be like people were talking about how aware she was. I'm like, I don't hear any self-awareness. We go through hard times. I respect that. But she was just kind of like, I don't know. It didn't do it for me.
I'm going to work on the male version of that book, and it's going to be better.
Okay, that's good.
It's actually going to be called The Mindful Midlife Crisis. So
perfect.
Trademark, copyright, boom.
I don't even recall that being popular. This is how into pop culture I am. I know the words eat, pray, love, but together they don't have any significance for me outside of those words. I don't even know what the thing was.
There's a movie with Julia Roberts in it.
Oh yeah,
and
Julia
I believe
Roberts.
it was panned. I don't think it got very good. I don't think it received very popular reviews. I think you can skip it.
Right.
Yeah. It wasn't for me. Actually, if you want the male version of Eat, Pray, Love, I strongly encourage you to check out Leave Only Footprints, My Acadia to Zion Journey Through Every National Park. It's by Connor Knighton. It's really fascinating. And as a nature lover, I think you would love it as well. Have you read it already?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's a fun read. It's a humorous read, and it's kind of a self-discovery read as well. I like it. He did a very nice job with it. He actually just interviewed Rick Steves. Do you know who Rick Steves is? Rick Steves does all these great trips and videos on these places all over Europe. He is a Europe travel guide guru. And if you're ever planning a trip to any place in Europe, I strongly encourage you just to YouTube Rick Steves and whatever the name of the country or the city that you're traveling to. And you will find all these amazing, just like hidden gems. When we went to Milan, there's a place there called Monument Cemetery, and it's free, and it's these amazing headstones and mausoleums that these Italian families have, and they're all like beautiful works of art that are 6, 10, 12 feet tall, and there are families that have taken up a whole plot, and they're just these amazing, beautiful works of art, and you can walk through this place for free. And had I not watched that Rick Steves episode on Milan, I would have never known about it. It was really cool, and wouldn't have known about Lake Como either, which is just a train ride north of Milan. So there you go, adventure seeker. Check into it.
You reminded me of the other places I've been to in Europe, too, that I forgot. I'm like, oh, right, that's in Europe.
So you talked about how women, their lifespans were only 49 years in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. And like at the time of publication of this book, 2006, 45 million women were between the ages of 40 and 60, which means more women of that age are in the workplace, and some are just venturing out into the workforce after raising children, which I think is very interesting. They spent that time raising their children, and now here they are 45, 50 years old, and they're going into the workplace for the first time. Do you see a lot of that? Do you have a lot of those conversations?
Definitely. Yeah, and I think, this next I'm jumping ahead, but 4 out of 5 women over 50 say having a job in which they help others is important to them. I think having a job to go to is super helpful for women kind of in my stage and age group, because it's purpose. It's something beyond the purpose that maybe you've been doing. And I've been lucky to be in a career that I could do both. I've been able to work part-time and was home for a couple of years, go back to work, work full-time. I mean, I think it's really important. And I do see a ton of women who are like, oh, okay, my youngest is in, 4th grade. I'm going to go back to work, but I'm not going to do what I went to college for or what I know. I'm going to totally change and do something different.
I think being that this is the way it is, we should just put all women over 50 to work so we could finally have some time to ourselves.
Oh, about time.
Right?
That's a great plan.
Yes, I know. Thank you. I solve problems. That's what I do.
Just out of curiosity, because we've talked about this before, so Kathleen is a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
So does she talk about this yearning desire to go to work?
No.
Because she does photography on the side.
She wants to do something, but we're not sure what yet after the kids are out of the house. We're kind of talking about that now. Yep. Just, well, maybe I'll get something part-time or, she doesn't really have to, but she wants to do stuff. She's the type of person that is intensely social, so she needs that that interaction more than anything else.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring that up because a work and a sense of accomplishment can be vital to a woman during this time. Women with high career momentum at this stage viewed their work as more central to their identities than women just maintaining the status quo and working towards retirement. So just elevating their work status and having a high career momentum equals higher self-confidence, independence, psychological health, and effective functioning into their 50s and 60s. So it really is important that women seek out opportunities in order to elevate their career. But then at the same time, it kind of goes to the sexism that we see in workplaces, where I can't imagine how frustrating that must be for women who are on this trajectory and then they hit this stone wall because the old boys club won't let them in the office door.
Well, that, and I think we talked about it earlier, but a lot of, myself included, a lot of moms I know, patients I've seen, we wanted to be home with our kids. I mean, there are definitely some of my friends who were like, hell no, I will pay a nanny $1 bajillion so I can go to work. And again, I firmly believe there's never a right or a wrong. It's what you're able to do. Not everyone can stay home. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. But I was lucky enough, and it was the hardest few years of my life being home. I mean, and I, again, like I said, lucky to have a job that was a little bit in the door, out the door. This clinic has always supported me. But I think just having something, again, with a purpose, whether it's, when you're raising your kids, that's arguably the most important thing ever. But then if you're kind of like, okay, I'm ready for a little something more, volunteer, finding a job, a hobby, even something that is fueling you, I guess, in a certain way. So, it's, I think a lot of women, the high career momentum, I do see that at women kind of at this stage, but I also see I'm good with kind of the part-time or the being at home and then doing just something else over here that's fulfilling, I guess is, it kind of doesn't replace raising kids, but it's the next thing. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's interesting that you bring that up because, like we've talked about, as women age, it sounds like you really are there to assert yourself because you've been the caretakers for so long. Now it's your time. Your time is here, and I'm curious, as someone who has been married for nearly 19 years, is your husband more emotionally available? Is he more affectionate? Because that's something that we talked about when we were talking about the male brain, where the oxytocin levels rise and that they become more emotional. So I'm curious if he has been as you guys get older.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm married to a guy who's pretty, for a man, I think pretty sensitive, I mean, so he's always been available like that. But I think we've both learned how to hear and read the other person, so I don't know if it's his hormonal levels or if it's just a lot of practice and a lot of me bitching at him for 19 years. Maybe a combination.
Like I said, it just takes us a long time to get things. We're not as complicated as women. It's just we're a little thick,
Right? I mean, yeah.
Do you find yourself now, as you approach 50, that you're trying to assert your own independence and doing things like finding more pleasure hobbies?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I think there's less guilt around it. I think the word guilt comes into a lot of people's narratives. Women, I feel like more so. So for years I was like, I shouldn't go mountain biking because, this kid might need this, or I might need to do this, or whatever. I would, talk myself out of stuff. And so I think, as a lot of women do, kind of miss these years of doing a lot of things we love. I did a lot less just outdoorsy things. It was just, it's easier with the kids to do this, and I don't know when it changed, but now I'm like, I don't even think about that. I'm kind of at that point. I make dinner many nights, but certain nights I'm like, figure it out. I'm doing this. But, you know, your kids have to be old enough. They can't be 2 when you're like, all right, see ya, I'm, going to do this. So, yeah, I do think that has happened for me.
Do they really have to be of age, though? I mean, that'd be kind of entertaining. Just watch a 3-year-old just, throw them some pasta and head out the door, right?
I mean, they'd be highly independent. We joke that my 12-year-old's independent because people are like, well, you kind of ignored her for a long time. I'm like, this is true. This is true. And she figured it out.
Can you talk a little bit about what your motivation is to go on this trip with this high school group of runners? Like, is that coming from a place like you want to give back to community? Is one of your kids involved in this group? I'm curious why you're volunteering for that.
Yeah, no, great question. It's all of those things. I mean, I'm a little almost embarrassed to say how excited I actually am for it. It doesn't sound dreadful to me, which is maybe weird, but yeah, my son is on the team and he's been kind of one of the driving forces behind this. He's heard about this trip that had happened for years, and then some of the coaching switched and they just haven't done it. And he's going to be a senior next year. So he's like, I want this to happen. I want to do it. So that would be the number one reason. And number 2 reason is I think these kids are awesome. They really are a great group of kids, and they all are pretty familiar with the outdoors, and I love that environment. So I think it sounds really great. And the person organizing it, I mean, talk about organized and efficient. I mean, she's just like got it down.
You give a lot of yourself as a nurse, and again, you've downplayed it, but we view you as a superhero, and we want to thank you for giving yourself to these students and taking them on this trip and being part of that. And we want to thank you for giving us the time to talk about the emotionally mature female brain. It was a really enlightening conversation. We really enjoyed having you here. I think having you break down the science behind it all really added to our understanding of the emotionally female brain. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great.
So for Krista, for Brian, this is Billy. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved. Take care, friends.